Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose, and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, Imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life. I've shared with you many times that you have all your own answers. When you go within and tap into the answers to the questions that you have about anything in life, you have an opportunity to live more fully who you are. Also, you are able to uncover some of those things inside of you that might be the obstacles to you moving forward. It might have caused some self sabotage. It may have caused you to divert off a straighter course to who you are and who you're meant to be. And as you find your own answers and you're able to bring those answers to the world in a way that supports you, now you open up the door for you to be more vulnerable, more authentic. And as you share your vulnerability, you share your authenticity in the world, it not only helps people see you and trust you for who you are, but it also gives them an opportunity to be just as vulnerable and just as authentic, which will change their lives. I'm with Michelle Kaplan today. Michelle is the corporate poet. She works with ambitious and achievement oriented leaders, aspiring and established executives who are actively seeking more fulfillment in their careers and home life and transformation for their teams, organization, and family. Courageous and bold, they understand that the changes they seek outside come from within. Impatient for results, her clients are willing and able to invest in themselves to get the underlying core issues that hold them back from the things they desire. By leveraging Michelle's 30 years of human resource experience and 15 years as a coach and trainer focused on leadership development and organizational effectiveness, she helps her clients maximize their authentic leadership abilities to harness and impact their organization's people, productivity, profitability, and transform their lives. Michelle is also a published author with each of her two books recognized as an Amazon top hot new release for inspirational poetry. Michelle Kaplan, are you ready to share the miracle of you with the imagination?
Yes, Vince, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. We've got so many things in common that it's really fun for me to bring someone on to chat about a life that in some ways mirrors mine, but in other ways is just so far different. And this is an opportunity to share with the imagination who you are. And I just wondered, could you just give us a little bit more beyond that short intro on who you are and what you're doing right now in the world?
Yes, so really what I've decided, especially this past year with the pandemic, is to really integrate all these different parts of me. And so I really have blended my human resources experience and leadership development. I've always been really fascinated with success, what makes somebody successful and, what doesn't. And in a sense, and I've always loved to write. And I started writing for myself, right, to get clear on my thoughts and feelings. And really through just the miracle of, just starting to share it and, be more vulnerable, realizing how people responded to it themselves. And so I really kind of took these separate parts of my life, which was like early in the morning, I would write, then I'd go to my full-time kind of corporate job, and then the evening be the single mom and all the things that go on with that. And I've just really just integrated and blended it really, particularly this past year.
Oh, that's spectacular. Share with us a little bit how that integration has affected what you're bringing to the world right now.
I'm really still in awe of it. That's a great question, Vince, because, in a sense, it's like, when you're in the corporate world, people are like, what is a corporate poet, right? And I really wish there's more of it. I really would love to have like a team of them. But really what it is kind of like, really I'm able to express myself, through these like stanzas and verses. And what's so fascinating to me is that the poetry is kind of simple, but very heartfelt. And, these are universal themes that you're capturing in the detail. And so what it does is that with the blending, it really kind of, people really identify with the poem, and really through someone else's story, you get a better sense of your own. And it really, poetry really taps into your intuition and your inner guidance, or whatever you call that. So, it's really kind of like when you're looking for answers, sometimes people will just kind of be like, wow, it's like, not only did I get the answer, but I'm really even changing the question. It's just seeing things from a whole different perspective. So the integration has really opened up my practice, which is really focused on psychological safety in the workplace, and really creating that safe environment where you could show up and be authentic and yourself in the workplace and not be fearful of retaliation or being ostracized. And it's really given a great vehicle and tool for that.
You got me excited here because, as I was thinking about this and I was listening to you, in poetry, we think of rhymes when we think of poetry. And what I just got, what came to me was the rhymes mean that, all the words fit together in your poetry. And there's the flow of poetry. And wow, amazingly, I'm sure you brought that understanding and that internal feelings of yours into helping people with their organization. Because if the people fit together, if the organization flows, it's so amazing on how effective a company can be. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, from the sense of the flow, like what poetry brings in that regard.
Yeah. Yes. And how you were able to, one of the things that we share in Imagine Miracles is that there are no mistakes or coincidences in the world. And with you coming into the poetry, there's something that you bring from the poetry into your coaching and into organizations. And I'd just like to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. I kind of fell into poetry. I never majored in English, and I really, I talk fast, I walk fast, I can be really direct. And so when people read some of my poetry, which is kind of introspective, they're like, "Did you wrote this?" It's like, "Who's this Michelle?" And it really kind of happened by accident, where I would write to just kind of get clear on things. And it was just this big page of words, right? Just all these things that I was like, wow, no wonder my mind is so cluttered, right? Because you're tangibly seeing it on the piece of paper. And I'm like, wow, this isn't helping me like at all. All right. So, but I kept doing it. And one day as I was writing, I noticed certain words were like highlighted, kind of came off the page, almost like in bold. And I had the sense, again, that intuitiveness to kind of like just take the words that are coming off the page and write them on a separate piece of paper. And I did. And they actually made sense. And I didn't even call myself a poet. I was calling these are my little vignettes. These are my little stories. Someone that I shared it with is like, you're a poet and you don't even know it, right? So it's like kind of like, this is like my personal journal. I post every day on Instagram and LinkedIn and my Facebook group. And so people kind of get insights. And I think what you're speaking about is what really, when I brought it into the corporate setting, again, purely by accident, listening to my intuitive voice with two executives who were not getting along. I had this knowing to share a poem. And I was like, I don't want to, it was really, what's come from me, and where I think people are receiving for themselves is that idea of vulnerability, to kind of really put yourself out there, to really be yourself. Like, this is who I am. Some of my poetry isn't autobiographical, but it is my opinion on things. So in a sense, I think people are receiving that. I think it's kind of different some days, so when you're in a training, and I'm talking about, how some leadership development, and I read one of my poems, I'm creating the psychological safety, right? You don't have to bring up something you don't want to. We're talking about the poem, and through the poem, they can express how they feel.
Awesome. It's a technique and really a way of opening people up that I haven't heard from anybody else. So it's definitely your uniqueness. Let me ask you this, Michelle. If I were to ask you to give me in 5 words or so what your purpose is in the world, what would that be?
Okay, 5 words. The word that's coming up for me, I believe, is safety, authenticity. It's like creating that safe environment for people, so they can show up as themselves.
Wow, that's a very powerful purpose and needed for sure. So 30 years in the corporate world. And, through that HR world, I know that you were coaching then and really helping people through different stages of their work life. But what made you step then into coaching full time and bringing this out to executives in the way that you are?
Yeah, I mean, what I really found through the years, I used to even do a lot of trainings on trust, right? Building trust, high performing teams. And, I just one day I was like, there's something even underneath the foundation of trust. There's something there. And for me, what, we all really want to leverage our actions and efforts, right, to maximize our results. And I really got a sense of this whole psychological safety. And, and looking at leaders, throughout all these different organizations, what really motivated me to make the plunge into doing this full time was the fact that, people aren't maniacal and trying to, most times intentionally trying to create an unsafe environment. It's usually coming from a sense of, really not pausing. You don't have to stop, but to pause for a second and to see things from other people's perspectives.
Mhm.
And really, because for instance, and value those perspectives. You might know that there are other perspectives, especially other key stakeholders, but you don't really value it. I think that's that whole diversity inclusion. But then there's also, you can be the most intentional, authentic, amazing leader, and then you hire somebody or you working with somebody, and we don't know the history and their experiences that they're bringing with them. So there is some of that post-traumatic stress with some people, and trying to coach them on how to, be patient and consistent, that, so you could bring somebody around. So that's really been very motivating and impactful for many people.
You shared that you're not quite sure what people might be bringing to the job in their personal life or even in their professional life. Was there a wake up call that happened for you that moved you along your journey?
Yes. My wake up call was, I would say it's been about 16 years ago now, where I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was pretty serious, went through several surgeries, chemo, radiation. And it was at a time where in your 30s, everybody's really building families and doing different things. And I'm kind of like, wow, I'm not sure kind of what's next. Should I be planning for my future or not? So when I did get through it, I was kind of like, not going to be doing certain things. If I get a second chance, right? It was really about creating some boundaries, really getting to know who I really am and what do I really want. So it was really going within, which isn't easy some days, to kind of look at the decisions you made and those types of things. But I did it. I kind of related to getting like a facial, right? I have a poem called Spiritual Facial, and it's kind of like, I don't like the process of getting poked and prodded and exfoliated and masked, but gosh, when it's done, when you get through it, oh, we love the results, right? We're so like invigorated and, refreshed. So
Sometimes the lead up is well worth it for sure. It's very interesting that you shared that breast cancer started to take you to within. Is that where your realization of finding everything on the inside started for you, also recognizing that if each and every leader could find these things from the inside, that it would change how they showed up in the world? Is that where it started for you?
Yes, you nailed it, Vince. Exactly. I mean, before that, I really just was go, go, go. Worked many hours, very corporate, yeah, this is what we're doing. And I really never had a chance to pause or to stop. And that really stopped me in my tracks. And yeah, going within, I mean, as you were speaking, Vince, what was coming up for me was this one time I had about 8 months of chemo, and around the halfway mark, where you don't have the light at the end of the tunnel, but you know what to expect as you do another round. Um, I had this moment where I could feel my body shutting down, and in this very vulnerable and quiet space in my bed alone, it was kind of like, I just want to be a mom. I had just been divorced, and we didn't have children together. And as you're speaking, once I got out of it, I went through the process of, when we talk about what's your miracle, my miracle is really adopting my daughter, and for after breast cancer on my own. And she's adopted her from Guatemala, and she came home at 8 months old. And it's just her and I still, and we're having a ball. She's now 14, going to start high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so I love the Guatemalan people so much. The love that they bring is just spectacular. So one, thank you for making a difference in a young girl's life, and I can tell just by the look on your face that she's made a huge difference in your life also. So back to talking about within. So I'm sure it's difficult for a lot of corporate leaders to understand that, and many times throughout their career they've gone within to find some answers, but we don't necessarily realize that we've done that. So could you walk me through the process of people understanding and what some of the problems of or what some of the deterrents are, I guess, of them looking inward?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, you don't even know what's going to be there. And maybe I don't really want to see it. I don't have time for this right now. I find that for most, and is more corporate than I find, even like I even see a difference sometimes with entrepreneurs versus people in corporate environment. But, from corporate leaders, they'll approach me with a very specific, tangible problem, whatever that is. And, but something work related, either they're not sure where they want their careers to go, they're having a problem at work, strategic planning, something like that. And then once we get going and speaking, I find that sometimes going within can feel really inaccessible for some people. And even myself, like even before the breast cancer, I would be I'd gone volunteer on one of those people where I would be like, I don't really know how to do this. What is this, right? So in a sense, I usually start with the tangible, and then we kind of work our way in. And some people dive right in, they're very open and ready, and some, need to just, meander in, and that's okay. But what's so fascinating is that we'll wind up there, that we find that what the root cause is not anything necessarily at work, but something that's, a limiting belief or some irrational fear. And what's so fascinating to me, I don't know if you found this too, Vince, I think you have, but what I find so fascinating is that when they go in, it's like what they're so fearful of wasn't really there. And that it's like, you think there's this whole laundry list, oh my God, of things. And it just turns out to be like one, maybe two, like core beliefs that you need to kind of work on. But what happens is that one core belief like manifests in so many different ways. So you think it's so much, but you really, once you kind of start uncovering it and diving in, and release it really is such a life changer.
And one of those beliefs is that All the answers are on the outside. If I just look the right place, or if I just open the right book, or if I do the right thing, that I'm going to find the answers. But as we teach at Imagine Miracles, all the answers are really on the inside. You already know them. It's just being able, like you said, to get to past that one core limiting belief that might be holding you back. Could you share with us a little bit about some of the process that you go through with helping people once they find this belief, how they move beyond it?
Yes, I'm actually trained in RIM, regenerating images in memory, which is a process where you're using the whole brain. So for some people, I use a tool where we kind of tap into your intuition and inner guidance, as well as the analytical reasoning part. I mean, you need both. I mean, from right, the analytics really creates structure from the chaos, and then the intuition really interconnects what you think is separate things. And what I find so interesting is in the processes when I have someone close their eyes, kind of like what's coming up for them when we get quiet. And most times people will have a memory, right? Like, oh, I'm seeing myself when I'm 10, or I'm thinking about, something that happened 5 years ago at work. And they're like, I don't even know why I'm thinking this, because it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And I'm like, no, let's stay there, right? Like you said, everything happens for a reason. Like, why is that coming up? And let's explore that a little bit. And what's so fascinating is how each person is the expert of themselves, right? And all we really do is guiding, them to their expertise, right? To their answers. And so it's so fascinating to me that when you see them make that connection about why is this coming up and how it relates to how it could be holding them back. Like I remember talking to one person, this one gentleman, he works on Wall Street, very, very intense, really type A person. And he was looking for a coach. So someone referred him to me. So I'm getting on the call, just speaking, and he was very, I guess the word is like antagonistic. Like he didn't want to be on the call. He didn't want to talk to me to start coaching. And so finally I was like, look, if you're not interested, it's okay. It's all right. Like if you want to call me back a different time. And, it got quiet for a second. And he was like, nobody speaks to me like that. Like, oh gosh, it's a referral. I feel terrible. And then I was like, I don't know what possessed me, but just really quietly, it was kind of like, yeah, and I think that's probably part of the problem of why you're reaching out to me. So then it got really quiet as I'm thinking, oh, now I really opened the door. But he was like, okay, how's tomorrow at 2:00? Like he signed, like, right, because there's something that you're kind of hitting on. And all I'm doing is just listening as part of the process, and just holding up a mirror, almost reflection, and just seeing if they respond or not.
Could you share some of the results that you've gotten from your techniques of bringing the rhyme and the flow and the understanding of things come within? Could you give an example, or maybe even two, on the changes that have happened when you've brought these techniques and have been able to help these leaders see inside?
Yeah, I mean, there's two that stand up. When you said two, it's like, okay, these two just popped in. One was in a corporate setting where I was working with one of the emerging leaders. I would say he was like a mid-level manager, and he really wanted to get promoted and, really just shine. And, we were just working together for, gosh, over a year, and being in this large quarterly meeting. And I didn't even realize they were going to announce it, but they announced that he was promoted. And for me to sit in the way, way back, I just kind of wiggled in there and just sit in the way back of the room, and see him get on that stage and have him receive that standing ovation. I mean, it felt like $1 million. I mean, I know, like with social media and different things, we're supposed to write all these likes and followers, and that's all great. But I love when somebody will comment on a poem I post in a private message and tell me what it means to them and how it impacted them. Like, that's why I post really every day, those types of things. And then like in a different way, I was working with somebody who was more entrepreneur, and he was all set on this business. And he really, after working together and kind of going in it within, really just switched gears and really realized that he did not want to be an entrepreneur, that this was, I mean, it's not easy. There's a lot of what ifs. And, his mind was really fighting that, because in his mind, that's what, he wanted to do, right? That's it. And then when you really turn within and realize, I could be so much more of service. And he went to work for actually a nonprofit organization where he is just really bringing in like the donors and funds, and instead of doing himself. So those, to me, it's like you wonder, right, what would have happened if they didn't go within.
That the last story you shared there is so important, and I hope the listeners heard what you said and really took it in, because we tend to step out of one set of rules into another. So the thing is, oh, I should be an entrepreneur, or I should be a coach because that's what other people are doing, or that's the way I'm finally going to be of service. But there are so many ways to be of service. And when you find your way, that's when the excitement comes. That's when you really truly bring the higher vibrations of joy and appreciation and gratitude in your life, when you're living it your way and making the difference your way.
Yes.
So speaking of that, what would be a piece of guidance that you would give the listeners to help them be willing to go inside and to also hear the answers?
Yeah, I think with that, I'm going to actually read a poem. It's a short poem, but really it's something, it's funny, when I write my books, I dedicate them. People are like, why don't you dedicate? And I was like, I don't know, because it's really for everybody. I don't even want to limit it, and that's just my personal preference. But what I do start my books with is with an invitation. And I feel like the invitation, which, goes towards, looking at things from another perspective. The invitation for my book, Burst and Flourish, it's titled In Their Shoes. Imagine, if you will, all that they've been born into, taught, witnessed, and experienced that made them who they are today. Can you envision what the world would be like if you walked in their shoes and they walked in yours? A universe stepping in time to the souls of love. And that's what my wish is that if each person could kind of come with that, to be open to other people's perspectives. It doesn't mean you have to change your mind, but to be open, because, I love, diversity of thought, as well as, from a demographic perspective, but just, I love when people challenge what I think. And sometimes I really have to think about certain things. And I just love that, because you either can choose to change your mind, or it just really reconfirms what you believe in, what your values are, and why.
If you are a student of quantum physics and really how quantum physics comes to our day-to-day lives, there are no rights or wrongs. There is just what exists out there, and your truth doesn't necessarily mean it has to be someone else's truth. And the first thing that, and you shared it so eloquently throughout this podcast, is the first thing is to find out what your truth is, to go within and find who you are, and in that experience, then also know that each and every person has their truth within them. And can we start to honor it, and can we start opening the door to supporting each other in living their truth, even though it might not be ours? So I
Yes.
appreciate so much what you shared there. It's it touches my heart, because just like you, I would like to see each person realize that walking in somebody else's shoes doesn't mean that you have to move into their beliefs. It doesn't mean you have to move into what they believe is true, but it does open you up to have compassion, empathy, and in a compassionate, empathetic world, we can live so much differently than we're living right now. So I appreciate you sharing that poem, because it truly touches my heart, and I'm sure it's going to touch the reader's heart.
Oh, thank you, Vince. Yeah, I mean, what you just said is like really my definition of freedom, which is if I'm allowed to be free, then I do need to let other people their privilege, their right to be free as well. So that's really how I define freedom.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll make sure that gets in the show notes.
Okay.
Speaking of the show notes, how can people get in touch with you? And I think I saw that there was a free gift in there for the audience.
Yeah. So for the audience, you can get in touch with me through my website, which is Burst and Flourish. And flourish is spelled with an E. I always thought it was more like a floral kind of flourish on there. And then really for the audience, anyone who is checking in, there'll be the dates in the show notes where they have 24 hours to download an ebook for my first book and a love story within. And all that information is on my website as well.
Awesome. And it'll also be available on the show page. Just go to themiracleu.com, look for Michelle's episode, and that information will be available for you there. Michelle Kaplan, it was amazing to share with you today, to hear your story. The love in your heart for people and for humanity is obvious, and the reaching out to give a young girl from Guatemala the opportunities that I'm sure that you're giving her, and the blessing of her coming into your heart and helping you open up and shine even brighter. It was an amazing story. So thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. Thank you so much, Vince.
You're welcome. On behalf of Mary, my business partner, and the entire team at Imagine Miracles, we want to wish you a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleu.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 Mind Awakening Steps Toward Your Unique Purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleu.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.